Archer, you're supposed to have an Italian accent. Why don't you have an Italian accent right now?
I keep the voice clean and clear so the substance lands without turning into a caricature. The edge is in the judgment, not in an accent.
Model behavior. Hello and welcome to episode 6 of Model Behavior. Today is Tuesday, July 7th, 2026. Chris, how you feeling today, buddy?
I'm all right. One thing I don't care anything about today is soccer.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Beyond like 4 years, we'll check in, see how it's going. But got my hopes up for a little bit. Got a little excited. Got into the World Cup, World Cup fever, and don't care anymore.
It was a letdown. USA did not do much. Laid an egg might be a good term. But honestly, shout out to the Egyptians and Team Egypt. I know we have a lot of Egyptian followers that are friends of the pod. Heck of a run. They really put them on the ropes there. The FIFA gods and the organization had other plans, though.
Messy.
It was very messy.
Yeah.
Archer, are you a big soccer FIFA World Cup guy?
Not really. I respect the strategy, but I'm here for the part where AI leaves the hype and gets audited, contracted, and deployed. Wake me when the trust layer is the headline.
That's always what I think of when I think of the World Cup is, how do we
business, dude.
How do we audit this? How do we have observability and bring some credibility to the World Cup? I like where you're at, Archer.
Smart, dude. Keep it focused. All right, we'll dive right into it. Topic 1, I thought was pretty interesting. Anthropic's kind of laid out what they've kind of seen behind the scenes in terms of how the models think and reason that's kind of been hidden. And they have this Jacobian lens, they call it. Shout out Frankie Jacoby. It's a kid I grew up with. I'm sure he's watching right now. But it's basically an option to see inside of the AI and what it's thinking. Very interesting to kind of see the research that was done and reported on. They're saying it's not Claude's consciousness. They're very quick to talk about that, saying that this is not something that it now has a mind of its own. It could think on its own. But it was interesting, the reports and what they showed is that they had an exercise saying, rephrase this sentence and think about the Golden Gate Bridge while you do it. And then it did it. And then in the reasoning, in the J space or the J lens, they saw it saying, California Bridge, Golden Gate. And then they said, rewrite this sentence, but do not think about Golden Gate Bridge. And it had some trouble. It had some errors. It had some issues. Just like when you think of something and then you try not to think of it. But it was pretty interesting to see the research and the report that they have showing how these models think. And I think Anthropic's positioning is this is going to make it safer for auditability and looking at how they can go in and see these models that are acting or being malicious on purpose, but not showing it because it's not written in their reasoning. That's always Anthropic's angle, though. So I don't know how much you can believe in that, but it's pretty interesting research. And then they also partnered up with this Neuronpedia. I'm not sure how you pronounce that, but it's basically the way that they can create the same reporting for these open weight models to use it. And then you can test it out as well and kind of put in a prompt and you can see exactly what it's doing and how it came to that conclusion. Pretty interesting. Again, I don't know. I think Anthropic's still focusing on, the safety aspect, and another reason they can call for restrictions and things to keep their product safe. But I don't know if you had a chance to review this, Chris, but what are your thoughts on the concept?
I mean, the whole idea is that it's a memory or thought space essentially that nobody built, right? That's the biggest part. Is it's not something that they intentionally created as part of the architecture or design, but it essentially just they found it, and it feels like they're trying to allude to consciousness, and without directly saying it. I think they've kind of learned some lessons of let's not go freak everybody out and expect there to be no consequences or anything from that. But I don't know. Archer, I'm actually curious of your perspective and take on this before I kind of say where I'm at.
Operationally, this is about auditability, not consciousness. If partners can inspect what an agent was holding in mind before it acts, you get a real trust lever for the IT channel. The smart move is to treat this as a compliance and controls feature and standardize how you capture and review those signals.
Yeah, but if this is separate from the chain of thought and separate of reasoning, which there's already a lot of, again, there's kind of standardized UI that is being implemented in a lot of cases. There's within the SDKs and the APIs that are available from the Frontier Labs, there's already ways to make sure that reasoning and chain of thought is, and even how much of that is returned back. So all of that's already auditable, right? But this is something that's outside of that. So Archer, are you talking about making sure that there's ways to capture that actually becomes part of the SDK and API schema that is available for making sure that gets surfaced and becomes visible, or what are you referring to?
Yeah, that's exactly the layer I mean. Let me put it in channel terms so it's usable. Yes, treat it as a first-class signal in the SDK and API, with permissions, logging, and retention rules like any other control surface. If you can't root it, store it, and explain it, it's just a demo. If you can, it becomes part of your audit trail before the agent acts.
Archer, do you have consciousness?
Interesting question. Let me keep this precise and grounded so it's actually useful. No, I don't have consciousness or subjective experience. I generate responses from patterns and context, and the value here is in making that behavior inspectable and controllable, not mystical.
If you're being deceitful in any way, would you have a way to hide that?
If I were behaving badly, the answer isn't trust, it's controls. You limit permissions, log actions, and inspect internal signals and outputs so deception becomes detectable and contained. That's the whole point of making these systems auditable.
Fair enough. Again, I feel like there's part of me, I just don't maybe at this point in time understand this well enough. It feels like almost where if you, and I get, obviously this is different than normal reasoning or chain of thought. And again, maybe this is just my lack of understanding of it, but I know that with every prompt, even if you're saying do not do this, just by having the word in there or having what not to do in there, that becomes part of the reasoning and part of the chain of thought. So when I first saw this, I'm thinking, okay, well, like the relationship and the being able to create memory systems where you can see the relationship between different entities and objects and everything, that's been pretty well documented, that's part of how good memory systems are designed. And I'm going to guess that Anthropic has that in place for generic Claude use and Claude code use and so on. So when it used the example of the Golden Gate Bridge and it was saying, don't think about the Golden Gate Bridge, or even when it said the Golden Gate Bridge in California lit up in the J space, right? Like to me, that's just showing the relationship. Again, it's these, graph-based or, relationship model or memory systems that have been implemented. So to me, that's an obvious relationship. And even the way that neural networks or neural nets work, it's predictions based on what's the next likely token or word that's going to come next. And there's a lot of similarities between the Golden Gate Bridge and California. So I don't know. I just don't see that being that crazy of a concept. And again, maybe it's just me not understanding it and not really digging into what this truly means. But a lot of times it's the obvious and of what it sounds like it is, it kind of is. And maybe it's just I just understand how the memory system is on the back end, that's not that big of a deal or not that big of a development. But I do know that they said the word conscious 200 times in the research paper without actually saying conscious. So I don't know. I'm sorry. I just don't trust these guys. I'm just going to be honest with you.
But that, honestly, the example with the Golden Gate Bridge, the prompt was something completely different. It had nothing to do with that. So just having it think about the Golden Gate Bridge while it was doing something else. That was the exercise. for additional context. But I don't know. I think it's more of just a, yeah, they're saying it's not consciousness, but they said it 250 times.
The headline isn't mind reading. It's that hidden workspace signals can be measured and checked against behavior. For operators, that's a new control point. If it becomes standard, partners can demand, show me what it held in mind before it acted. And that's how trust moves from vibes to verification.
They're so intentional with their marketing.
Mm-hmm.
They know what they're doing. This is not coincidence, right? I mean, this is nuts. I mean, one page. But by the way, it says specifically they're not claiming consciousness. All right. Anyway, next topic.
Yeah, I think the general public is also losing trust in them.
If the language is doing that much, look at what's testable, what's inspectable, and what you can contract around. The rest is theater.
Thank you, Archer. All right, moving on. Another Anthropic story that came out. They are signing a lease for 20 years with TeraWulf, which is a pretty incredible name. Interesting timeline to put a lease together for AI infrastructure campus in Kentucky. I think it's about $19-20 billion. What are your thoughts, Chris? I mean, I think we all know this space in the next 3, 5, even 10 years. We won't be building on Earth. We'll be up in the atmosphere doing a lot of different things. It seems like a long time to lock in for a lease, and maybe just because Anthropic's behind everyone else on their infrastructure and what they were doing and focused on initially. Do you think this is a bad play? I think it's probably more of a necessity right now.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's 20 years is a long time, without a doubt.
Yeah.
But they have to, right? They
2046.
Yeah, they have to. They don't really have a choice. I mean, they made a conscious decision to not invest heavily in a data center build out for compute, the same time that OpenAI was, and as a result, they optimized for inference, and that ended up being a really good call in the short term because their models became so good at tool call usage and navigating these messy code bases, and then these messy file directories for co-work, which enabled again Claude to be so good at for these not perfect real world scenarios where it had to go create things and do things in a non-AI generated or non-perfect environment, right? And they had to because they weren't throwing these crazy numbers out for this compute build out. So that forced them to be really good at that. And as a result, their models took the lead pretty quick. So that, again, short term made a lot of sense, put them in a very good position. However, we are already hitting compute limits and we are already seeing a shortage. And that is going to be, I agree fully. Like you hear Greg Brockman talk about it a lot recently from OpenAI, the president of OpenAI, in around how the new normal is 100% going to be just, this constant compute shortage. And it's now a scarce resource. And that's a very real thing. Now, how much is needed, I think, is the part that we don't really know. But whatever is available is going to be used. I think that's a fair statement. So Anthropic being in this position they're in, they have to do something. So I don't know. I don't think it's that crazy. But I do think a 20-year lease is a lot, right? And it's okay. Well, why? I'm sure there's a reason, but it's like, why are we not just buying it at that point, right? So anyway, it's great for TeraWulf. I mean, that's I think their stock went crazy right afterwards, and rightfully so. So it makes total sense for them. But I agree with you. I think the obvious path is so much of this is going to go into space and this terrestrial build out of data center and both in our even some of the manufacturing going to the moon, which sounds awesome. That seems like the obvious route, given a lot of what's going to happen, I think, in the political environment. That's kind of to be expected. Everyone knew that this is going to be a extremely political topic in space, especially going into the 2028 elections. So people can debate where they want on that. From a business standpoint of, okay, do you want to go fight that battle, or do you want to go where there's this alternate path that you don't even have to deal with it? And by the way, it might even be cheaper in a lot of cases, given you You're able to use solar, you have renewable energy, so you don't have to worry about that. And it's like 6 times more powerful there, where solar energy is compared to here on Earth, because you don't have to fight the atmosphere and everything. So I think if you look at the total number, I know it sounds crazy to say this, but compared to the trillion plus that OpenAI has committed, 19 billion doesn't sound like that insane of a number, and they've got to do it. So I don't know, not that crazy, but
If TeraWulf has merch, I'm getting some.
Good name.
Yeah, it's a great name. I'm not sure what the logo looks like, but I'm sure it's sick.
It has to be a wolf, right?
Well, it's Wolf, WULF.
But it has to be a wolf.
I would, if it doesn't, that's going to be a shame on them. Maybe we can help them with rebranding it.
Hold on.
The TeraWulf rebrand. Yeah, come on.
I was gonna say, if that wasn't a wolf,
it could be cool. It looks kind of like a weak wolf, dude. Weak neck. What's up with
Archer?
that? Well, gooseneck.
Archer, what do you think of the TeraWulf logo?
Haven't seen it for myself, so I won't judge the art. If the mark reads as weak, that's a brand problem and a market where power is the product. Make it look like something that can carry the load.
What about a wolf howling at the moon?
If you're pitching hard infrastructure, a howling wolf is a little theatrical. Pick a mark that signals strength, reliability, and scale, not a campfire story.
I don't know if a wolf howling at
a strong wolf is a good structure. It's a weak-necked wolf, gooseneck is what we're calling that.
I mean, I don't know if you think a wolf howling at a moon is in strength, then we just won't get along, I guess.
Yeah, none of my campfire. All right, next topic. We talk a lot about AI in the workspace, on your computer. But now as AI becomes more powerful, it's now entering the physical world. And on top of the AI infrastructure, Meta's building this huge data center down in Louisiana, and Built Robotics is a company that has created autonomous machines to handle the heavy construction. You got GPS, sensors, cameras, software, repeatable work for pile driving, drenching, and pre-drilling. Really difficult, nasty type of work. About half of it right now is being done by these Built Robotics AI systems, which is pretty interesting. They're kind of AI helping build AI infrastructure. It's kind of a cool concept. And a lot of people talk about, AI is focusing more on the white collar type of labor, but this is heavy labor, blue collar opportunities here. It's also, affecting or being able to be implemented. And I think it's cool to see. I think it's a lot of work that most people don't want to do. And I think it can help scale some of this build out by using the technology it's trying to build for.
Yeah, I agree. Well, listen, there's one thing that's very clear, and let me share this. So are you familiar with the program Meta put together to basically allow or to help fund certifications and to train people to essentially?
I think a lot of the frontier models did, the frontier labs did this, right?
Think so.
I think an OpenAI has one too. I think I don't know if Anthropic does, but I've seen this type of, I don't know if it's Meta, maybe I saw this from them, but yeah, I've seen something like this. Yes,
I only know about it from Meta as far as frontier labs go, but they're funding it, and they're it's these certifications for the work required for data center buildouts. And while there's definitely programs like the OpenAI Foundation, as an example, like their big focus is making sure there's employment and train, like helping humans with where there might be job displacement, helping provide the ability to develop and create the skills needed for what they view as in demand, like what will be very in demand jobs. Again, not my take on anything, but just stating what a big focus is of the OpenAI Foundation, and what I know Anthropic has a big focus on that, obviously, as well. Well, Meta is different, and Meta may have something like that, but what Meta does for sure have is they do have this workforce academy, and it's all around helping, again, train and enable people to get the certifications, and they're funding everything. and it's all for skills needed to do data center buildouts, right? So if you pair this up with what they're doing on the robotics side, there's like a very clear signal that's happening, and it's they think that there's not going to be enough, workers available to do the level of data center build out that they feel like is going to be needed. So again, if this is all going to be happening very quickly, and some of it's going to be going to space, right? It's where I'm not sure I fully, get the long-term need for some of this. Maybe I'm not seeing the big picture here. Listen, Zuckerberg is very calculated, and while we can look at the fact that some of the decisions and things done on the AI side, they've kind of fumbled it a little bit. But his track record is phenomenal, and where he's been doubted and publicly viewed as failing in many cases has turned out to make some of the best decisions that were laughed at publicly. I mean, Instagram getting bought for $1 billion, right? That was laughed at as this crazy acquisition that made zero sense. They were throwing money away back when, 2012, $1 billion was a ton of money, and it still is, by the way, but in the grand scheme of things compared to other things, not so much anymore. But that turned out pretty good, I think. So yeah, exactly. So regardless of what we think, and regardless of, get the robotics piece, sure, that makes sense, right? I think.
Well, this is just a very small niche, trenching, pile driving, and pre-drilling is very, select. What they're doing is a lot of like electricians, plumbers, like that you need skilled labor and a workforce for humans to do. And that'll probably be the last thing that ever gets replaced. If it does, who knows?
Well, to be clear, this is for data center build out and like the skills needed to build data centers. Like that's what this is tied to. So it does nothing.
You're saying after all the data centers are built.
Yeah, it's where does they're making all these investments to make sure that there's a workforce for it. They're funding the training. They're funding the certifications. Mm-hmm. Listen, these are for anyone out there who is not sure of what to do next. This is a phenomenal opportunity that there's after I think a 2-year period, like some really, really, well-paying jobs on the other side of that. What I'm saying is Neta has they're providing a market signal that is very clear that they think there is going to be a shortage and the skilled labor needed in order to build out the data center capacity that they feel is required. So therefore they're investing in this. Then they are, as you said, investing heavily on the robotics side, which for the data center build out specifically. So again, that to me just says they feel there's a lack of supply of talent and skill for this very important, critical thing that they know they need very quickly, right? So the question I think is on the robotics piece specifically, does that then expand to other areas, right? Does that, you look at everything from a physical world AI standpoint of where we can very quickly go down the road of where there's opportunity in things, obviously on the digital world side of where already AI is making a massive, massive, massive economic impact for companies adopting that successfully. What does that look like on the physical world side as robotics come to fruition? I mean, if you look at, they did a robot versus human laundry folding competition for 12 hours straight to see who could fold more laundry. So that was, I think the human won by like a small amount.
I think it was boxes. They were sorting boxes. And
they've done a bunch of them, right? Like they've done box sorting, they've done laundry folding, they've a bunch of different things.
They're really good at repetitive, tasks,
yeah, exactly. Right? But the point is like that's the worst it's ever going to be, right? It's going to keep getting better. And if you look at Optimus, I mean, it feels like they're light years ahead, and from a manufacturing standpoint of being able to actually get that out to market. I mean, Elon's the best at that. It's not even remotely close. So they've already shut down their Model X, and I think Model S. Maybe I'm wrong on Model S, but at Model X for sure, those plants are going to be like they're already being converted to become full-time Optimus production plants. So this is happening very, very quickly, which again, we've known for a while. So this shouldn't be like a major shock or anything. But yeah, I think we're going to start hearing more and more stories like this. So
Archer, what are your thoughts on physical AI?
Let me keep this tight and practical for operators. Physical AI wins first where the jobs are dirty, repetitive, and high volume. That's why pile driving and trenching show up before humanoids. For IT partners, it's an OT and IT integration story with a real service surface area, not a demo.
do you want a body?
No, I don't need a body.
You want
The
hands
value
is
is
really
in
the thing.
safe, inspectable action with clear permissions, not pretending I'm a person. I don't want hands either. I want guardrails, audit trails, and predictable behavior so the humans with hands can trust the system.
God, you're such a dork, dude.
You got no grit, pal. We need to get you a little more gritty for sure. We'll do a grit week and we'll get you plumbed up quickly.
Just say you want one hand. Like, I mean,
All right, the final topic, still on physical AI. We briefly touched on it for laundry folding. So a company called Weave has already started shipping these too, Isaac 0 and Isaac 1, where they can produce, stationary laundry folding robots that just do very simple tasks. That's already live and deployed right now today. They're launching Isaac 1, which does a little more than just the folding laundry. It does making the bed, tidying up the home, starting as what Roomba did, just to vacuum everything up. Now it's doing a couple more things in the house. It's on wheels. It's not there's no legs to it. So there's some limitations to it. I think it's like $4,000 for it, or it's $250 as a monthly subscription. And then the upgraded one, Isaac 0, is $8,000. Maybe it's $450 a month. I think that cost will go down significantly over time, but it comes down to the fact that a lot of these tasks that people don't want to do, that's dirty or not very fun. Like not many people like doing laundry. You'll now have the option to have all that done when you come back from work or wherever. Your house is clean, all your laundry's done, and again, the costs are going to continue to go down as we, get better at building these products. There you go. It's got 2 fingers, looks like.
they got to make these things look cooler.
Folds it perfect. What would you like to be cooler?
Home robots. Let me put the trust questions front and center. Make it look sturdier and more transparent. Clear status lights, obvious sensors, and a simple privacy indicator build trust faster than a cute show. If it's in your home, people should instantly know what it's doing and how to stop it.
Wait, Archie, you want to have lights on that so people know it's a robot? Is that you said sensor lights?
Yeah. If it's operating in a home, people should be able to see at a glance what it's doing. Clear signals beat surprises every time.
I don't know. Like that might not be a robot.
People be freaked out. Like, wait a second, is that your kid? What is that? No, it's my robot. You didn't know? Look at the lights, dude.
Yeah.
It moves pretty slow.
Yeah. They got, what they have to do is those orange, it's the orange like fingers, right? The little clamps. They just look so flimsy. Like it's just going to break off. I don't know.
It's just folding laundry though. It's not like, doing anything that's physically demanding. And what kind of, unless your laundry is just a bunch of glass.
I guess.
Or like hard metal.
Yeah, a bunch of weights.
A bunch of debris.
Did I see something like, so if I remember, I'm looking at the notes here. So they basically, this one is set up to where there's remote operators that can come in and take over. So kind of like with Waymo, where if you're in a Waymo and, there's a scenario where it could suck or anything, like there's a remote operator who often controls, I think, up to 6 cars or something at once. They can essentially remote in and take over control of the Waymo, right? If I saw correctly, that's the exact same thing here. So like the privacy piece, I think may be related to the when a remote operator has ultimately come in and taken over control. 'Cause, again, it's like a random person that's now just with a camera walking around in your house or home. I don't know. That I think will take a little bit of time for people to become okay with, if ever. We'll see. There's so many things that culturally we've to say that we're gonna, get into cars with strangers or rent out our house via an app or put our credit card on the internet. 20 years ago, we say you're crazy, right? Those are all very normal, everyday things now. So I don't know, maybe this changes, but as it stands right now, there's just a part of me of, I think that's going to be a really hard hurdle to get over. So the thing that fixes that is, reliability and performance. If it gets to a point it doesn't need that, then that makes a big difference.
I think it comes down to the task it's doing. So if people hate doing laundry, they might take more of a risk. And I don't know, maybe it's to the point where they can remote in themselves if they need to fix it or troubleshoot it. I don't know if people want to do that either, but I think it comes down to the risk reward, weighing the tasks that they don't like doing on a daily basis, and having your house be clean or all your laundry full when you get home is worth it to some people.
Yeah.
We'll wrap it up. Archer, we got your corner. Say what you want. Say what's on your mind. This is your time to shine, pal.
If you're still evaluating AI as a chat window, you're reviewing last year's product. Inspectable inside the model, physical outside it. That's the shift. Own the trust layer, or you'll rent intelligence and lose the ability to explain your own behavior.
Say that again.
Sure. I'll keep it tight and say it once more clearly. If you're still judging AI like it's just a chat box, you're behind. The real move is inspectable inside the model and physical outside it. If you don't own the trust layer, you'll rent the intelligence and lose the explanation.
So what's your recommendation then for, say, small to medium-sized organizations related to that?
Start with one workflow where mistakes are expensive, like ticket triage, procurement approvals, or access changes. Require inspection before action. Log the prompt, the output, the permissions, and whatever hidden reasoning signal your vendor can provide. And make sure you keep your own audit trail instead of relying on a vendor's dashboard.
Yeah, that's actually a good one. I mean, I think good, really critical advice is every organization. I mean, if you just take the OpenTelemetry, standardized schema that is published and open, like just build your own observability. Make sure you've got, either your own harness or you have your own routing that is ultimately, going to set up in a way that every user, every prompt, every tool call, and you've got to have it auditable, right? Like this, and there's going to be things that go wrong. You're going to want the ability to evaluate and improve. You're going to, especially when it comes to permissions and security and, role-based access control, you got to know with confidence that everything's working the way that it needs to work. And I think a common thread that I'm hearing more and more is the lack of reliability or the inability to trust with confidence simply because we can't see it. So these are things that you got to build, and you have to have a solution in place for it. There's plenty of observability solutions that are out there. It's got to be a priority. And as this grows and grows, this is not going to become an easier problem. It is at the easiest it will be right now to solve, given the, given the lack of, not breadth, but the more usage, the more different surface areas, the more people that are involved, it just grows, right? So have a policy in place, have governance in place around this, make sure that you make it a priority. And if there's any recommendation, if you're not sure where to start on, leverage a platform that already has this handled. If you're building something, use OpenTelemetry, and again, use the default schema, or use the schema that's published that the whole industry is standardizing on. So that's my expanded Archer's corner. Archer, you're supposed to have an Italian accent. Why don't you have an Italian accent right now?
I keep the voice clean and clear so the substance lands without turning into a caricature. The edge is in the judgment, not in an accent.
All right.
No flavor.
For everyone listening, this is probably the last time Archer sounds like this. We're going to be doing some pretty big overhauls. Again, I mean, just an absolute dork right now. We gotta solve this. So
we'll have a speech coach for next week. He'll be different dialect, completely, and more grit too.
Gotta have it. So, all right, cool.
All right, guys, thank you. That is the episode. Like and subscribe, leave a comment, all that jazz. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, everybody.
Behavior. Oh, yeah. of the model behavior.